Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another random walk down Mill Street. Today's topic is Bore Ad Ana, which is a particular kinah recited on Tisha B'Av. And I saw the message in the text here had to do with last week's class. So we'll have to address that later. But this week is about Bore Ad Ana, which is a particular kinah. It's a kinah we read here on the morning of Tisha B'Av. There are some places that read it in the evening, and you may recall from last week, its original placement was not on Tisha B'Av at all, but rather on Shabbat Eicha, as it was written in the old keynote books. And Shabbat Eicha, we call today Shabbat Chazon, for the first words in the Haftarah. In the middle of the Haftarah, you have, I think the second paragraph begins the word Eicha, so they also call it Shabbat Eicha. But it was not originally said on Tisha B'Av. It was said on the afternoon of the last of 3 weeks, going into Tisha B'Av. So it was close to Tisha B'Av, but originally said on Shabbat. And then already in the 17th century, there were rabbis who did not like the custom of saying kinot on Shabbat. They said Shabbat is not a time for mourning, and so they said, you know what, keep the kinot, but don't say them here. Say them on Tisha B'Av, and that is what we do. Now, this kinah, Bore Ad Ana, as we're going to see, is very widespread in the Sephardic world, but it has certain limitations, which can perhaps point to its origins. It is not said in Ashkenaz, and it is not said among most of the Eidot HaMizrach. It is really and truly a Sephardic kinah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And so I don't know if you noticed this. I don't know how many people have actually watched these after being live, but I like to be able to see a little bit of who's on. So I have this little video gallery in here, but it always causes problems in the playback. I'm going to try to keep it minimized for most of the time. Anyway, if you see a little box moving around your screen, that's what that's about. So, okay, Bore Ad Ana. We're gonna go right into the text of it itself. This is the text as taken from the keynote book of Isaac Leeser, so middle of the 19th century, and we read it in Shearat Israel in the morning of. It's sort of towards the end of the keynote. I think we call it number 21. We have a lot of keynotes. We go 25 plus keynote, so it's read towards the end of the keynote. And it has a really, really famous melody, and I'm just going to play it for you, and so you'll get a sense of what the Spanish-Portuguese melody is right off the bat, and then we'll talk about some other aspects of it. So here we go. So that is a recording from David de Solapool. We're going to get to some of your questions soon. That is a recording of David de Solapool, the late minister of Sheretz Israel, from a recording that was released by the Sheretz Israel League not too long ago, or I guess by now it's probably 20 years ago or so, but it was originally recorded in 1955. You can tell from his reading that it's extremely dramatic. And when we read it in the synagogue, it's not quite as slow, but it has a lot of drama, a lot of, it's read with a lot of emotion. And what you don't get from this recording, because it's solo, is the response of the congregation, which is always really strong, in particular for this kinah. If you haven't been to Sheretz Israel for Tisha B'Av, so first of all, the evening service is usually quite well attended, because people who aren't familiar with the rest of the service think that this is particularly special because of all the drama that is involved in the sort of theatrics of the evening service, which is that the whole synagogue is dark, very, very dark. And the teba is draped in black, the heichal is draped in black. There are no lights on, or almost no lights on in the entire synagogue. People have to use flashlights to read their books. And the melodies are very dramatic and emotional. And so people come, they flock, or they used to flock, to the evening service. But then when you come back in the morning, very few people come in the morning. For a variety of reasons, but what they're missing is some of the greatest music of the synagogue of the entire liturgical year, and you get 20 different melodies, all sung by congregants, and the congregation singing along together. It's a special kind of feel in the synagogue on Tisha B'Av morning that you don't usually get the rest of the year. Anyway, what I was trying to bring out here is that the congregational response, Abi, 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 Yoshevet Gamuda, Zongeket Abi, Zongeket Abi, is very strong. So just so some things that you wouldn't, perhaps, I'm going to talk about the music, then talk about the text itself. So the stanza, each part of the kinah is read by the reader. In this case, it was Dr. Poole, Boread Ana, all the way until the refrain, which is Abi, Abi, Abi. These last words, they say it 3 times. Then they say these words, Yoshevet Galmuda Tzoreket Abi, and they repeat Tzoreket Abi twice, as I sang for you a second. Then the reader goes on, Na'agam Nada for the second verse. And when he gets to the end of that verse, Mishine Labi, congregation jumps in and says, Abi, 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 Abi. So the congregation is always saying those 3 words, Yoshevet Galmuda Tzoreket Abi, and then the Chazan, or the reader, will go on to the next verse. If you look at all the stanzas, it spells out the name of the author of this kinah, who is otherwise unknown, and we only know that his name, or his first name, is Binyamin, from the first letters of each of the stanzas. Bet, Nun, Ya, Yud, Mem, etc. Binyamin. Now, so much for the way we read it here at Sheretz Israel. There are, in the Ashkenazic tradition, you have a lot of kinot, in addition to kinot about the destruction of the temple, or the temples. You also have kinot that have to do with the Crusades, modern kinot about the Holocaust. All sorts of persecutions are commemorated on Tisha B'Av in the Ashkenazic tradition. That is absent, mostly absent from the Sephardic tradition. Sephardic kinot almost exclusively have to do with the destruction of the temple and the Hadrianic persecutions. So not the same time of the year 70, but a little later, after the put down of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, there were persecutions, and so that time period, we'll call it the 1st and 2nd century, are what is being commemorated in the Spanish and Portuguese and the Sephardic keynote, with very few exceptions, and one of those exceptions is this kina. This kina doesn't have anything, or at least nothing explicit, about the destruction of the temple. This kina is about a dove, where the people of Israel are compared to a dove, that it cannot find comfort. It is flying around and it can't find a comfortable home, and it's crying out, Abi, 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 Tzoveket, Yoshevet Galmuda, and you look through each of the stanzas, we're going to listen to a lot of them, and it's talking about the galut experience of the Jewish people, and you might even talk about, you might think that it has to do with galut Sfarad, the Gerush Sfarad. Maybe not. We'll have to see that by the end. We'll see if we can make some assumptions about when and where it was originated from. But it does not have to do, or at least not explicitly, with the destruction of the temple, unlike almost all the other keynotes that we read on Tisha B'Av. So it is interesting on its own for that reason. Shall we listen to a few more examples of this? So I also saw, by the way, Claude told us that it's read in the evening in the Syrian tradition. So we're gonna see some of that as well. Okay, thank you, Dina. Okay, next. Oops. Okay, I'm just showing you here. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this slide shows you some of the earliest printings. We see here, this we saw last week. This is one of the earliest printings of the keynote. It's from Venice, 1598. A little hard to read, but this is, we're gonna try at the end to look at this stanza Yoatzim Aleha later on. And here it is in 1631, same text, almost exactly without any difference. Again, these are printed for Shabbat Chazon, not for Tisha B'Av. Okay, now I have for you several different traditions to listen to. We're going to start, and the reason I'm going to show this to you is how similar around the entire Sephardic world the melodies are for Borei Ad Ana. So let's start off here in the Balkans with a Chazan named Isaac Mezan. This recording was made around 1970 in Jerusalem from Chazan Isaac Mezan.
Borei Ad Ana, Borei Ad Ana, Yonadecha b'msuda, toch pacha mokesh, toch pacha mokesh, toch pacha mokesh, toch pacha mokesh, ani yahum ruda, ובלי בניה, ובלי בניה, ובלי בניה, ובלי בניה, יושבת גלמודה, צועקת אבי, צועקת אבי, 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 יושבת גלמודה, צועקת אבי, צועקת אבי.
So hopefully you could hear very clearly how even if the phrasing and which words they repeat is not the same, melody is very, very much the same. And so we're going to see that again and again. Now we're going to go to from the Balkans to North Africa. And I could have given you from North African traditions. I could have given you many different Moroccan ones, and all across North Africa. They're all very, very similar. I chose this one from Libya. I think you'll enjoy it. So I just want to show you that the Libyan tradition does not repeat Abi, Abi, Abi after each stanza. They just repeat the last words of each stanza. So Mishine Lavi is what the congregation comes in and jumps. Mishine Lavi, not Abi, 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 but otherwise you can hear the same melody running through it. Now going back up across the Mediterranean again to Salonika. Let's try the next stanza. So that's Salonika. Sounds very similar to the Balkans, as one would imagine, because they're coming from the same basic geographic area and from the Ottoman Empire, from the Turkish Empire. But here they have, same melody again. And now I'm going to play for you the Syrian way of singing it, which is a little different, but you can still hear it in there as well. Okay, so I don't know if you could hear it. So you have the same kind of theme, not as much. There is repetition, but not exactly the same way as the other traditions. So that's what I wanted. We went across and diagonally across and all over the Sephardic world. It's not really found in Iraq, in Yemen, in Persian traditions. The Edot HaMizrach do not have Boreat Ana. In modern times, it's said in Iraqi synagogues, apparently. But I saw an article from Edwin Sarusi, who thinks that that's a very modern addition to the Iraqi keynote, and not original. And the reason is it says it comes from Spain, and it's something that was very, very popular among the Sephardic traditions, and basically unknown outside of the Sephardic world. We're going to have a few more things to listen to. The next one is from Bordeaux. Which is the Spanish-Portuguese tradition. Again, as you can listen, if you can remember back what David de Solapoul did very slowly, you'll hear it from the Bordeaux tradition. This is going to go back to, I think, the first stanza, and then it's going to do something interesting. After he reads the first stanza in Hebrew, you will then hear the same words sung in Spanish translation, where it's called La Paloma.
Bimtsudato
I really like that recording a lot. Yes, thank you, Annette. Bordeaux is French, correct, but Bordeaux is a Portuguese community, historically anyway. Now I think it's more North African than Portuguese, although some synagogues still hold on. And what you have here is a very widespread Sephardic kina. In around 1989, 1990, I don't know the exact year, I didn't copy it for you here, Professor Herman Solomon, Zichrono Livracha, published a paper talking about the Spanish translation of this kina, La Paloma, and basically he compares this version that's sung in Bordeaux that we heard a little bit of with a Ladino version, which is also well known. And while they're very similar, Professor Solomon shows that they do not come from the same source. They are not the same words, they're not the same source. And so we will listen to a little bit of the Ladino version as well. If I can get to the right page. Okay, so the Hebrew text here, as well as the Ladino text here, comes from the Sidur called Arbata Aniot, which is, the successor to those Sidurim, Machzorim I showed you early on from 1598 or whatnot. But this one is published in the early 20th century in Vienna. And it has Bore Ad Ana for Shabbat Echa, with the instruction that these kinot are not to be said on Shabbat, and said on Tisha B'Av. And then after Bore Ad Ana, it has a Ladino version. And we're going to listen to that right now.
Criador, hasta cuándo tu paloma encarcelada y el lazo enlazada y el lazo enlazada y el lazo enlazada, mezquina y desdichada y sin sus hijos y sin sus hijos y sin sus hijos está solitaria, exclamando Señor, 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 está solitaria, exclamando Señor.
So so that's the Ladino version, all following the same melody. Yes, Paloma means dove. It's the whole Yonat Techab Suda. The whole song is about the dove that can find no rest and is scared and chased after by hunters, and ultimately at the last stanza, finally a Goel Tavi will have redemption. Okay, so now that we've heard all the different versions, let's talk a little about where it came from. So the text, as you saw already in printed version, going back to 1592, but it actually is older than that. And as you might imagine, with songs that share the same words and the same melody throughout the Sephardic world, it's pretty old. It's pretty prime. It's not a late kina, and the music is not late since it's shared across the entire Sephardic world. Very few things are like that. Some of the things that are similar are from Kippur, from Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, very old Sephardic melodies that come from pre-expulsion Spain, essentially, or from very early in the expulsion period. So how far back can we go? And here, what you're looking at here is a Geniza fragment of a standalone page. It doesn't have the whole text, but if you can, I don't know if you can see it so well, but here's Bore Ad Ana Yonat Chabim Suda. The part of the poem is here on this one page. This is from the JTS Elkan Adler collection, 3294.4. If anyone wants to look it up, you can ask me. You can find it online and examine this page. But this doesn't have a date, but it's late medieval. You know, it's 14th, 15th century. They share the same rhythm. Yes, thank you, Claude. And one other place that we find this, also certainly in pre-expulsion Spain, is a manuscript called Parma 1929. Parma 1929. It's also sometimes called the Parma de Rossi manuscript. It's a Mahzor. It's a prayer book for Sephardic, Aragonese Nusach. And in it has a bunch of things: Kippur, Ta'anit Tzibur, and the 3 Shabbatot de Puranuta. Notice all these things are fast days. You normally wouldn't put Kippur together with Ta'aniyot, but they're all fast days. So I guess that's what they were doing in this manuscript. But it dates, it has a date, it has a colophon, it has a date, we know who wrote it, which it comes from 1481 in Spain. So pre-expulsion, but not in a good period. 1481 is late in the Spanish period, so there has already been forced conversions earlier. There has been a lot of anti-Semitic attempts at conversion in Spain. And so by the time that this is being written, this manuscript at least, it's the end of the Spanish Jewry period. But I want you to take a look at, I'm going to go back a little bit to the first page. Take a look at the penultimate stanza. Yo atzim aleha etzot hi anusha, zarim ach zarim, samu achalusha, be'ol kabed becherpa ubusha, gadol mach obi. This is what it says here. Cruel aliens take counsel against her. Yo atzim aleha etzot hi anusha. She is afflicted because they have weakened her by a heavy yoke. Samua chalusha be'ol kabed, with scorn and shame. Becherpa ubusha, gadol mach obi. That is what's written in the Leaser keynote book and in some others. But you should know that this is a censored text. And you can tell that if you go to some of the other versions, like we have here from Zanetti, 1598, and Menashe ben Israel in Amsterdam in 1631, they both say the same thing. Yo atzim aleha etzot ki anusha zarim ha'ovedim elilim ki ein lahem busha gadol mach obi. Different text. They said against her with evil. What do we say? Counselors are plotting against her. Zarim ha'ovdim, strangers who worship elilim, foreign gods, ki ein lahem busha, for they have no shame. Gadol machovi, great is the enemy. This is different than what we saw in Leaser, but this too is censored. And so we have to go all the way to that manuscript to get the uncensored version. And so let's do that now. And thankfully, Rabbi Rode sings it for us. And this is the way we sing it in Sheretz Israel today. And this is the way it's been sung in Amsterdam for a long time, without the censored versions. And so you will see as Rabbi Rode sings it, what the original said. Oh, oops, what just happened here? I have to go back. Just what a moment to lose my screen share. Go back here. Share screen. Why can't it go? Something is wrong. I have to start that again. Oh boy. Okay, let's try this one last time. Otherwise, I'll sing it for you. Okay, hopefully you can see it now. And we're going to listen to Rabbi Rode.
용아침 알레항에초티 나누샤 자림 항오베딤 에니님 실로샤 아벨 바루ach כי אין להם בושה גדול מחובי, גדול מחובי.
אבי, 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 יושבת חלודה, סונגת אבי, סונגת אבי.
So that is the uncensored version, which has an explicit reference to Christianity. Who is it that is plotting against the Yonah? Who is it that's plotting against the Jewish people? It's those people who worship Av ben Varuach, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's an explicit reference to Christianity that got censored out in different ways. So the earlier censorship takes out just very few words, but then the rhyme gets messed up. So that's why it says in the earlier censored versions, you sort of have to know that it's supposed to say something else, which is why you get Yoatzime aleha etzoti anusha zarim ha'ovedim elilim. You have to insert the word shalosha, and then you also have Av ben Varuach, which is taken out. But another version here keeps the rhyme scheme and inserts different words. Yoatzim aleha etzoti anusha zarim achzarim samu achalusha be'ol kabeh becherpa busha, just to keep the scheme without confusion of the melody. The melody is important, as we saw, and universal pretty much. So in order to read it properly, you kind of need to fill in some extra words, which is what happens in the Leeser version. Leeser didn't make them up. They come from other editions earlier than his. But that is the story of the censored stanza that we now currently sing in its original form here at Sheretz Israel. It's good to have a 500-year-old manuscript when technology fails. Thank you, Jack. Very true. That is my presentation for you this evening. I'm going to allow everyone to talk to each other. I'll stop the share here. And you can feel free to ask any questions. Boy, where's the... here it is.